What's up, everybody? Welcome to today's stream. I'm just waiting to confirm that I'm live. Looks like I'm live. Here we go. Welcome to the show, everybody. Today, we're taking a deep dive into flexibility, and I've spent the last couple of weeks rebuilding our flexibility blueprint. Yanni and I weren't happy with the way that it was guiding people through the journey with flexibility, and it is such an important topic. It's something that so many of you guys want to see improvements in, and it's one of those topics it's one of those things where you just get really frustrated if you're not making progress. Now, I'm trying to get my seat in a better position here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read through the first point of the flexibility blueprint, the mechanism of flexibility, and then I'm going to talk about it, and I'm also going to answer one or two questions about flexibility that have come in over the weekend. So here we go. I've had to set up my computer a little bit differently today to do this, so let's see how we go. All right, so the flexibility blueprint, unlock your body's true potential. If you're here, chances are you've either noticed your flexibility has declined over time or you've hit a frustrating plateau that's preventing you from unlocking your full potential. Whether you're trying to regain the flexibility you once had or aiming to break through and achieve advanced movements for peak athletic performance, this blueprint is designed to help you achieve your goals. I'll introduce three powerful concepts that are the cornerstone of effective flexibility training. You'll learn why so many people struggle to make lasting progress even after years of stretching, and discover the real-world case studies that demonstrate how these blueprints work. Plus, I'll provide actionable steps you can immediately implement to level up your workouts and start seeing results. If you're a visual learner, I've included yada yada. By the end of this guide, you'll have a clear understanding of how to move forward, regain your lost flexibility, and push through plateaus to reach your peak performance. Flexibility isn't out of reach. You just need the right tools and a smart, structured plan. This blueprint will give you everything you need to start making progress today. So if you haven't done so yet, go and download the flexibility blueprint. It's free. If you go to unitygym.com/flexibility, you can grab it and you can learn all about it, because I'm just going to break down the first point here, which is the mechanism of flexibility training. Understanding how flexibility works in your body is key to unlocking it. Flexibility is more than just stretching. It's a complex interaction between your nervous system, muscles, and connective tissues. By understanding this mechanism, you can train smarter and see better results. When you're young, flexibility is almost effortless. Kids can achieve impressive flexibility just by sitting in a stretch for a minute or two. This is because their bodies are still in a state of rapid growth, with connective tissues, muscles, and bones that are highly pliable. It's like clay that's still soft and easy to mold. Children's bodies adapt quickly because their tissues haven't fully solidified, and they're constantly learning and growing. This effortless flexibility during youth can often give people the false impression that the same stretching techniques will work in adulthood. The truth is, once you've developed flexibility as a child, your nervous system and muscles retain that code. Like riding a bike, it's easier to regain later in life because the body remembers the movement patterns. If you are flexible in your youth, even using suboptimal stretching techniques, your body will quickly adapt again. Excuse me. It's as if the brain already has the software installed and it only needs a quick update to return to that state. So that's why some people do get a good result when they return to flexibility training as an adult, and they just, start seeing good results. But they usually hit a plateau and get to a point where they can't get past, a point that they could get past when they were kids. And so we're going to talk now about, what you do in that state. And for everybody else who never got flexible as a kid and who wants to get flexible as an adult. However, for adults who weren't flexible in their youth or haven't maintained that flexibility, the story is very different. As we age, our connective tissues become denser, our bones solidify, and our muscles and tendons become stronger but less pliable. It's like the clay has hardened. It's much more resistant to change. Sitting in a passive stretch for a few minutes, which worked as a child, no longer yields the same results. Instead, gaining flexibility as an adult requires a much more intentional and strategic approach. It's not just about stretching harder or longer. To see progress, we need to tap into the underlying issue. In this section, we're going to break down the exact mechanisms that govern flexibility in the body. We'll explain how your nervous system, muscles, and connective tissues all play a role, and how you can work with these systems to achieve the kind of flexibility you thought was only possible in your younger years. At its core, flexibility is controlled by your nervous system. When you stretch, sensory neurons called spindle neurons in your muscles sense the stretch and send a signal to your brain, which then decides if the stretch is safe or dangerous. If your brain thinks the stretch is too much, it will send a signal to contract the muscle to prevent injury. This is called the stretch reflex. Your muscles also play a role. They're responsible for contracting and relaxing to create movement. To improve flexibility, you need to teach your muscles to relax and allow more length. But here's the trick. Just stretching your muscles isn't enough. You need to convince your nervous system that it's safe to stretch further without triggering the stretch reflex. Then there's your connective tissue or fascia. Fascia is the scaffolding that holds your muscles and nerves in place. When your fascia is tight, it restricts your range of motion. Over time, fascia can become stiff and inflexible, which is why it's important to include techniques like foam rolling that address the fascia as part of your flexibility training. Understanding these components is key to making real progress in flexibility training. Without it, you'll struggle with plateaus and frustration. Here's a story of one of our members, Lachlan. Lachlan came to us with severe lower back pain from a herniated disc and zero flexibility. He had no idea how flexibility worked or why his body was resisting movement. We started him on a full body mobility routine and foam rolling to release his tight fascia and teach his nervous system that it was safe to stretch. Within weeks, his lower back pain disappeared and he could squat deep and pain-free. From there, we progressed him to advanced flexibility training and he unlocked the splits in just a few months. So this is a quick little video of Lachlan after he'd achieved more flexibility. But this is a really common story that we see at Unity Gym. People that come with really bad injuries and they're really afraid to move. And like a herniated disc, when Lachlan started with us, he was in a bad way. He had to almost be in the naughty corner for a lot of the movements because he just couldn't do a lot of the weightlifting and a lot of the flexibility movements without triggering his back pain. And he went on to becoming very flexible, and now he does CrossFit and he performs really well at CrossFit. So it's incredible what happens when you do the right things. So here's some real world application tips. Load management. Flexibility training requires a careful and patient approach. Much like strength training, one of the biggest mistakes people make is thinking that if they aren't seeing progress, they need to push harder. However, pushing beyond your body's limits can lead to micro tears in your muscles. These tiny tears may seem minor, but they send a strong signal to your nervous system that the limited range of motion is necessary to protect your body from injury. When this happens, instead of allowing more flexibility, your nervous system reinforces those restrictions even more. It perceives the increased intensity as a danger and responds by tightening the muscles further, limiting your range of motion even more than before. This is the opposite of what you want in flexibility training. The key to improving flexibility is to train your nervous system to feel safe in the new range of motion. You do this by gradually increasing the intensity of your stretches, staying within a comfortable range that doesn't cause pain or strain. Over time, your nervous system will learn that these new ranges are safe and it will allow greater flexibility without resistance. Progressive overload. In flexibility training, just like in strength training, progressive overload is the key to making noticeable progress. However, there's a unique balance you need to strike to avoid injury while pushing your limits. The way you achieve this balance is through two powerful methods: end range contractions and loaded stretching. End range contractions are where you push really hard at the farthest point of your range of motion, but it's important to understand that you're contracting the shortened muscle in this position. For example, excuse me. When you are sitting forward and reaching for your toes, your hamstrings are lengthened and stretched while your hip flexors are shortened. An end range contraction here would involve contracting your hip flexors in their shortened position to build strength and control in that end range. This is one of the most effective ways to safely hack your nervous system, signaling that it's safe to allow more flexibility. The beauty of end range strength training is that it carries a low risk of injury, which makes it an excellent tool for progressing faster. When you contract your muscles at your joint's end range of motion, You build strength in that position, teaching your body to control those new ranges. This makes your flexibility functional and useful in dynamic movements rather than just passive flexibility. So this is an example of end range contractions for the middle splits. There's two exercises I'm demonstrating here where I'm contracting the glutes at end range. So I'm contracting the muscles that are opposite to the adductors, which are the ones that need to be more flexible if you want to get better at the middle splits. So loaded stretching. On the other hand, loaded stretching involves using external weight or resistance while in a stretch, which helps you build strength in your connective tissues and muscle fibers as they lengthen. While loaded stretching is a powerful tool for increasing flexibility, there is a higher risk of injury if you push too hard too soon. For this reason, you don't force progress with loaded stretching. Instead, you let it develop naturally alongside your end range strength. As your flexibility improves, you gradually progress to more challenging versions of loaded stretching, but you must be patient and only increase the load when your body is ready. So here's an example of me doing a much more advanced form of loaded stretching for the middle splits. So this is the straddle up to good morning. So this is an example of an exercise that if you're not ready for it, you will definitely be causing tears in your muscles. So the trick with progressive overload in flexibility training is balancing these two approaches. You want to push hard with end range contractions because they are low risk and offer significant progress by training your nervous system to allow more flexibility. But with loaded stretching, you take a more patient approach, allowing your range of motion to improve naturally. Once your body is ready, your range has increased, you move to more challenging versions of both end range strength and loaded stretches. The combination of these two methods approached with the right balance will lead to significant flexibility gains without putting you at risk of injury. All right, program periodization. Flexibility training, much like strength training, requires structure. Periodization is the process of breaking your training into focused phases that each emphasize different aspects of movement. This structured approach prevents plateaus and ensures steady progress. A common mistake people make is thinking they can achieve results by stretching harder without a clear plan. However, without a structured, evolving program, progress will eventually stall. In periodization, you alternate between different phases in your flexibility journey. Much like how an athlete structures their strength or endurance program, each phase builds on the one before it, progressively improving your range of motion, control, and strength in the stretched position. A well-designed program will incorporate mobility, flexibility, and end-range strength in different ways, depending on your goals and current flexibility level. An example of periodization would have you begin with a phase that focuses on mobility, ensuring your joints can move freely through their full range of motion. This phase is about preparing your body for the more intense demands of flexibility training. You begin each session with foam rolling, which helps release tightness in the fascia by improving blood flow and tissue pliability. Foam rolling allows your muscles and connective tissues to function more effectively, which is crucial for smooth movement. And a good foam rolling routine, you hit your whole body. So you get all the major muscle groups to get that result that we just spoke about there through the whole body. After foam rolling, you take each joint in your body through full range controlled mobility movements. This includes dynamic stretches and active movements that ensure your joints are functioning properly and that the surrounding muscles can move without restriction. For example, exercises like hip circles, shoulder rotations, and deep squats activate all the key muscles, making sure your joints can move freely. Mobility is gentle and can be done daily. It serves not only as a way to improve joint function, but also as a warm-up, cool-down, or even a recovery workout on rest days. This phase builds the necessary foundation for deeper flexibility work by keeping your joints healthy, reducing stiffness, and promoting better movement patterns. Progressing with periodization. Once you've established a strong foundation through mobility, you shift into the flexibility phase. This is where the focus moves from joint mobility to increasing the length and strength of your muscles and connective tissues. Here, the goal is to build strength with end range contractions and thicken muscle fibers through full range loaded stretching. Unlike mobility work, flexibility training is more intense and requires more recovery between sessions. This phase includes a combination of static and dynamic stretches to increase your range of motion, as well as loaded stretching, where you use resistance such as weights or resistance bands to deepen your stretches. These stretches are always performed within the safe range allowed by your nervous system, meaning you never push to the point of pain. Over time, as your nervous system adapts and allows more range of motion, you can progressively increase the intensity of your stretches. This is where progressive overload comes into play. Just like in strength training, you gradually increase the difficulty or load to continue making gains. Here's an example of end range contractions for the hip flexors, followed by loaded stretching for the hamstrings. So that's a way how you would use these principles to get more flexible hamstrings. Flexibility training and recovery. Oh, and guys, if you're on the live here and you've got any questions about this, hit me up, put them in the comments, and I'll answer them for you. Recovery is just as important in this phase as the stretching itself, because flexibility training pushes your muscles and connective tissues to their limits. You need to allow time for those tissues to adapt and repair between sessions. Much like with strength training, you wouldn't target the same muscle groups 2 days in a row. Proper recovery between flexibility sessions ensures that you continue making progress without risking injury or overtraining. Conclusion: by structuring your training into these two phases, mobility first followed by flexibility, you create a smart, balanced program that steadily increases your range of motion, strength, and control. This periodized approach ensures sustainable progress and prevents the common pitfalls of stagnation or injury that come from unstructured training. By understanding and respecting the body's built-in mechanisms for flexibility, you can train smarter and avoid frustration. Flexibility is a skill that needs to be nurtured over time, and with the right approach, you'll unlock new levels of movement. So that's just the first point from the flexibility blueprint. I'll go through the second point. Why is this showing like that? There we go. I'll go through the second point for the flexibility blueprint in tomorrow's session, but I'm going to talk a little bit now about this first point, about my experience with it, and I'll answer a couple of questions that have come up over the weekend. So when we discovered these processes with flexibility, kind of by accident, because when I started flexibility training properly, so I started stretching when I was 17, when I started doing martial arts, and I stretched right through until I was 30 and really got mediocre results. I was doing a lot of, sit and hold in a stretch for, a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. Sometimes I tried doing 10 minutes in a stretch, and I missed the boat for, those adaptations that happen as a child. And I got mediocre results at best. And then when I was in my mid-30s, I made the decision that I wanted to get flexible. And the first part of the journey for Yanni and me, and for our tribe at Unity Gym, was that we developed a 20-minute mobility routine after going and visiting a friend of mine, Aaron McKenzie, who's a really flexible dude. And he taught us his mobility routine that he uses for his warm-up and for his training. And we just got such an incredible result from it. We'd never done foam rolling for our full bodies before, like a routine. Like, we knew how to foam roll, we knew how to do it, but it was something that we did, like, we'd just do a little bit of foam rolling on our back if it was sore or whatever it is. We'd never done this full foam body self-myofascial release routine followed by mobility. And we just had such an incredible result from it. It was instant. When you do a good mobility routine that starts with foam rolling and moves into full body mobility, you feel instantly better. It's the kind of thing where if you get up in the morning and you feel stiff, you'll do it and you'll immediately go, oh my God, I feel so much better now. The aches and pains are gone and I've got more range of motion. And then, so we had such a great response from that we went back to Unity Gym and we developed our own version of it that we would use in our workouts, and we started doing it at the start of every workout. So for the first time ever, we had this habit of doing a mobility routine. It was something that was built into our training, and before that moment, flexibility was always something that was like an afterthought. It wasn't a part of the workout. When we did our workout, the workout was resistance training, so it was weights or calisthenics or a combination. And then if we felt like it at the end, we'd do a bit of flexibility or stretching. And you just never get flexible that way. So that was, we all had a breakthrough, and the breakthroughs that we had are like what I described with Lachlan, like immediate reduction in aches and pains, like something that happened after the first session, but after the first month, it was life-changing. when I got out of the army, I had, because this was only 2 years after I got out of the army after serving as an infantry soldier for 4 years, and I'd fractured my spine. I had a bilateral pars fracture in L4 and L4, I think it was, and then I developed spondylolisthesis and spondylosis in L4 and L5, and so I had really, really bad back pain. And my back pain almost completely went. I didn't have to take painkillers anymore, so that happened within a few weeks. We could all squat deeper. We could sit down in a squat much easier. We could press overhead easier. Like all these basic movements that were harder were now becoming unlocked. But then we hit a plateau. You know, we got to a point where, like, I was still trying to get to the middle splits. Middle splits was my benchmark movement for flexibility development, and I couldn't get past it. And I was still experiencing these micro tears because I was in that state where I wasn't getting better. And so I would push myself harder and I would try to force going deeper into the splits. And all I would get was micro tears and this constant experience of going forwards and backwards, you know, 1 step forward or half a step forward and then 2 steps backward. And then I'd spend the weeks after that, you know, recovering from these tears in my muscles and just getting back to that level that I was at. And that's when I started learning about end range contractions and loaded stretching. And so it was this process of learning, and it was only after that I achieved the middle splits and I achieved the back bridge and I achieved these things that we, you know, Yanni and I, we always come together and look back on what we've done and try to unpack, you know, why has this process that we've used created a positive result, or why has it created a negative result? And that's what the whole evolution of the unified movement system that we've created, where we balance strength and flexibility in the same workout. That's how it was developed, because there was no guide for what we developed. There was nowhere that we could look like. Every coach that we worked with, that we would try to ask questions about, how do we, you know, combine these methods together? Nobody could give us the answers because nobody had done it before. And so, you know, that's how we were able to come up with this process with the flexibility blueprint, where we look back and we looked at what these milestones that we were able to achieve were, and what was it that got us there, and what was it that then got us to the next level and the next level. And so that's why, you know, that first point in the flexibility blueprint, we've outlaid how program periodization has worked really well for us, and then for the over 10,000 people now that we've coached around the world to go through this process as well, and who have all had their own, you know, similar success stories. So what I want to do now is I'm going to bring up a question. And again, if any of you are watching live and you have any questions that you want answered, please put them in the comments. Even if you just want to say, hi, Rad, from this part of the world, it would mean the world to me to be able to know that I've got people that are watching this that I can respond to, because these live streams are always much better when I have interaction. So this is a comment from Joel Doxtator. I hope I've said your name correctly here, and I will bring it up on screen here so you guys can see it. So here it is on the live stream that I did last week. So he said, the only way that I got flexible was by kicking higher and higher during shadow boxing. There seems to be a component to a dynamic quick stretch that overcomes the body's defensive contracting. I also found that doing intense cardio for about half an hour before stretching will increase my range of motion. This could be fatigue, overcoming the nervous system, or blood flow, not sure which. So that's a really great insight, Joel, and I'm going to, and for all of you, I'm going to unpack exactly what was going on there. So first, I'll talk about the 30 minutes of cardio and basically warming up. So what warming up does before you do a flexibility session is, when you're at rest, your body prioritizes brain function and digestive system and other functions within your organs. So we have a certain amount of blood in our body, and what it does is it takes blood from the muscles, so it takes blood flow from the muscles and prioritizes brain function and digestion and all of that. And digestion takes a lot of energy from the body. So that's why if you've had a big meal and then you do a really hardcore training session, one of the first things you do is you purge. Your body just goes, well, I'm not going to digest this now. Let's get rid of it so we can focus on working out. And at rest, it's been many, many years since I heard these numbers, so excuse me if they're not 100% correct, but at rest, up to 10% of your body's blood flow is dedicated to brain function. And during a high intensity workout, that drops down to about 2%, which is why when you're in the middle of an intense workout, people can ask you really simple questions like, what's your address? And you go, it's this, and you have to stop and think about it because your brain's not just firing the way it is. And then on the other hand, what happens is when you warm up, your body, your heart starts pumping blood into the extremities, into your muscles. So it prioritizes muscle function so that you can get better muscle contractions. It also softens up your fascia. It softens up the, what's it called? The synovial fluid in the joints, which is like the lubricant in the joints. And all these processes happen that aid in stretching, aid in flexibility, aid in muscle contractions. So when you warm up, you will absolutely produce a better result in a flexibility session. And then the other part to your comment here, Joel, where you've said the only way you got flexible was by kicking higher and higher during shadow boxing. What you're actually unknowingly doing there is you are doing end range contractions. So when you kick high, you are bringing your leg up as high, as far as it can go, and you're contracting your muscle. It's a very, very fast end range contraction, but it is an end range contraction. And you're absolutely right. The dynamic component of that, when you're contracting those muscles to get as high as you can, you are, it makes it very, very hard for the nervous system to contract the opposing muscles at the same time. So generally speaking, in a high kick, we're talking about the adductors and the hamstrings that are the opposing muscle systems that prevent you from being able to get high, depending on which kick you're doing. And you're contracting at end range, you're contracting the quadriceps, hip flexors, and the glutes. And so unknowingly, you're doing end range contractions. And the results that you've had from that would be skyrocketed if you were also doing some of the methods that I'm talking about here intentionally, where you were doing intentional end range contractions paired with loaded stretching as well. You would have an incredible result if you were doing that with your dynamic stretching as well. And this is one of the reasons why some martial artists, not all, it depends on what kind of training you've done, but why some martial artists can kick so high, because they work on slow and controlled kicks, which are basically end range contractions that are specific to martial arts movements. So it doesn't surprise me that those methods worked well for you. So KA is saying, hello, here from the US. What are your thoughts on tissue work such as cupping, ASTM? I've got no idea what ASTM is, so please tell me what ASTM is. Trigger point therapy, red therapy, far infrared as part of tissue nervous system restoration. Do you do any? So I'll go into that in just a sec, but I'm just going to say this really quickly because I haven't done it and I'm meant to do it. My brother always tells me, you got to do this. If you're liking this content and you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, give me a little like on the video. It really helps with the algorithm and makes me know that this stuff is the stuff that you guys want to see, because I always get up in the morning and think, it's 5:38, well, it's 6 a.m. over here now, and I always think, what should I do today? What do these people want to hear me talk about? So yes, all that stuff has a great place in muscle recovery. When you talk to physical therapists, and Yanni and I are fortunate enough to have close friends who have got PhDs in exercise sports science and who are working closely with professors at universities that are doing research, and physical therapists that are at the absolute top of their game. So when we can have open conversations with people that know way more than we do about this stuff. And whenever we have these conversations, their response is usually, there's not any good research on how these kind of things work, like cupping. Don't quote me on this. There might be some really good research. I'm just talking about the conversations that I've had. I've heard that infrared treatment has a lot of benefits. There is good research on infrared. I know there's different types of infrared. You've listed different things there, red therapy and infrared therapy, and there's different spectrums of it. Apparently, the research on that is really promising enough that a lot of people are using infrared treatment. I've heard that it assists with tissue repair. So basically like, recovering from injuries and things like that. If it was within my budget, I would absolutely have an infrared sauna at home, but they cost a lot of money and it's just out of my budget right now. It's not something that is within the realm of what I want to be spending my money on. If any, I have had a company reach out to me that they wanted me to test their infrared products and they were going to give it to me. But a lot of these things are scams and I'm really careful about clicking on links or anything in emails, so I didn't go for it. But yeah, if I had access to an infrared sauna or an infrared light, I would absolutely use it. I know a lot of people use them, and a lot of people really swear by them. And then I'll talk about my subjective experiences. I find that all of those treatments work really, really well for recovery for me. So I really like sports massage. Cupping has given me, when I've done it, it's made me feel really good afterwards. But what I will say is it's all just really the icing on the cake, you know, and it really is, you know, a small amount of the picture. And I can definitely say that it wasn't any of that stuff that made me flexible. What made me flexible was doing what I just outlined. You know, doing foam rolling has been hugely beneficial to me. Daily mobility, and then using flexibility and flexibility training to you know, to really go deeper into it. And tomorrow's show, I'm going to go really deep into what the difference between mobility and flexibility training is. So make sure you tune into that. Julitus Mike Melendor is saying, thank you. You're absolutely welcome. Thanks for tuning in and thanks for commenting. Veronic G is saying, hello, what are your thoughts on doing a workout training the day after a flexibility training? How would you plan a week with rest, workout, and flexibility? Thanks from the UK. So that's a good question. I think there's absolutely no problem with that. What we do with the UMS, the Unified Movement System, which is the system that we teach to all our members with our online coaching, we combine flexibility and strength into the same workout. So I don't like the idea of saying, what about doing a strength training session and then the next day doing a flexibility training session? Because if you've got like however many days a week you've got to work out, and everybody's different. For some people, working out 3 days a week is the most they can do. And for others, working out 5 days is the most they can do. Whatever it is that you can do, I believe very strongly that it's very important to do strength training on every one of those days, because the more strength training you can do, the stronger you're going to get, the more muscle you're going to build. And if you're over the age of 35, you are fighting a battle against biology to build and hold on to as much muscle as you can. And I fight that battle very, very hard. And just using, you know, natural supplements that anybody can buy, and, you know, a really well-structured training plan, I don't look anything like a bodybuilder. You know, it's really, really hard to build muscle and retain it at age 46, which is where I'm at now. So you want to be working on that. But then at the same time, I want to be really flexible. And the best way to get flexible is to do flexibility training and mobility training every day. So I don't like the idea of, I'm going to do flexibility training tomorrow and today I'm going to do strength training. I think it's a really flawed approach. And I think one of the reasons why a lot of people really struggle to get flexible is because they approach it like that. I've seen a lot of people where they're really committed to either their strength training or their cardio. It's usually one or the other. And then their solution to wanting to get flexible is that they're going to do yoga or Pilates twice a week. And it's like a drop in the ocean. It's just not enough volume to see any real progress. Not only that, but we have had so many people come to us at Unity Gym, especially when we had the gym in North Sydney, when we weren't an online business and we were training people face to face, who were yoga veterans. Like they'd been training yoga for like the better part of a decade, like 8-9 years. And they just hadn't gotten more flexible from doing yoga. And that was all they did. They were doing yoga like 5 or 6 days a week. Like they were highly committed to it. And they came to us because they wanted to get more flexible. And training with us for a matter of months, like I'm not talking like 1 or 2 months, like maybe 3 to 6 months, they had huge flexibility breakthroughs. And the reason why is because the way that we combine strength and flexibility training, there's a lot to it, and I'm going into topics that are a bit different than what today's show was about, but it's all in the flexibility blueprint. That when you do strength training where you train antagonistic movements in the same workout, meaning that you train a pushing movement with a pulling movement in a 1-to-1 ratio, that also has a really beneficial effect on flexibility, because what it does is, when you're contracting one muscle group, it's almost impossible for your body to contract the opposing muscle group, which allows for more flexibility. And then when you also do full range strength training, you capitalize on that by developing more flexibility. So full range strength training, like I've gotten flack for posting videos online where I'm doing chest flies. I have to try to get into a position where you can see what I'm doing here. But when I do chest flies, where my arms go as far back behind me as I possibly can, and I'm using a D roller behind me, which is like a foam roller that's only half, so it's this way, but then on the bottom it's flat. And I use that D roller going down my spine so that the scapula can fully retract, and you can go all the way down so that the pecs lengthen as much as they possibly can in the pec fly. But I got taught that method by Ben Pakulski, who's an ex-Mr. Olympia athlete, one of the most accomplished bodybuilders alive, who he taught Yanni and me that method because of the way that, on one hand, it accesses more muscle fibers in the chest, so you get more potential for growth. But what it also does is it develops flexibility at the same time as strength. So back to your question, how would you combine, like what would you do for strength flexibility? I combine them together. So I do strength training for the upper body whilst I'm doing flexibility training for the lower body in a 1-to-1 ratio. Because when you do a good strength training workout, like if you're training the way that I've spoken about, where you do antagonistic movements, so you'll do a chest press, you don't just go straight into your row, you do a chest press and then you rest for generally 1 to 2 minutes, and then you'll go and do your row, and then you'll rest for 1 to 2 minutes. So in that rest time, I'll be doing flexibility work for my hamstrings or hip flexors or adductors, so that you're basically doing like a circuit where you're going from strength to stretching to strength to stretching, and you're doing it in a round robin, and you're always getting recovery for the upper body while you're doing flexibility for the lower body, and that's called active recovery. And that is by far the most effective way. I shouldn't say the most effective way. That is the most efficient way that I've found to get strong and flexible and build muscle at the same time. And for the average person, this is one of the biggest problems that people are facing today, is everybody's looking for the most effective way to get a result. But when you look for the most effective way to get a result, it often ignores all these other aspects of health and fitness. Like the most effective way to get really strong is to do, a compound movement, and to not pair it with anything else, and to rest for between 4 and 7 minutes between sets. And I'm getting this from a good friend of ours, Sebastian Orb, aka Australian Strength Coach, who was training in Unity Gym. We were allowing him to train his clients in Unity Gym for a year or two before he opened his gym, Base Gym. And he is the coach of Hafthor Bjornsson, the strongest man in the world. So this is the coach of the strongest man in the world. Now, when you train that way, your workouts take a long time and you ignore everything else to get as strong as possible. So if you're going to look for what's the best way to get strong, you ignore what's a good way to get flexible, and you ignore what's a good way to get fit. So for the average person who just doesn't have that amount of time to train and who doesn't have that commitment, I don't necessarily think it's right to be looking at what's the best way. I think it's better to be looking at what is the most efficient way that I can get strong, build muscle, get flexible, and get fit, because that's what we all want. We want to be able to perform good at what we do while we age, and we don't want to get muscular and get strong and then wake up one day and realize that you can't touch your toes at all and think, I better get flexible. I should go to yoga and do that twice a week. And it's just not really going to do much for you. And so, and if you were going to do what you were doing with what you were talking about with, doing a strength training session and flexibility training the next day, you only just really have to consider recovery for the muscle group that you're going to train the day after. Like, it's not, and you always have to consider, if you're going to train that way, if you're going to do strength training one day and flexibility training the next day, and you want to know how recovery is going to affect it, you always have to think of what your number one priority is. What's your priority goal? You can't have two priorities. There's only ever one priority in life, because priority means prior to. So what goal comes prior to everything else? And when you have that approach, then you always program where the priority goal is trained when you're most recovered. And then you do the next goal the next day, like that, So I hope that helps to give you some insight into that. And Veronique is saying, I use infrared sauna blanket and it's amazing for recovery. Yeah, I bet. I'd love to get one. I should get one day. They're probably less expensive, but the ones that I've always looked at are the infrared lights that are like $1,000 or something like that. I'll get one day. Terry Tricks is saying flexibility doesn't exist without proper contractions between all muscles. Yeah, look, I mean, flexibility does exist without proper contractions between all of the muscles, but it's not usable flexibility. And the problem is that if you get flexible without developing muscle contractions and strength in those ranges, then what happens is you can get to those end ranges, but you can't control them. And that comes with an increased risk of injury. So if your legs can open to the splits, but you can't actively pull yourself to at least about 70% of what your full range of motion is, then you have a real disparity between what you can control and where your body can go. And then when you try and do like sports that have fast lateral movements like tennis or soccer or football or rugby or whatever, then you have a really increased risk of injury, because if you try to change direction really quickly and your legs open up quickly while you're trying to go that way, then you have a real risk of injury, of tearing your muscles. So Terry said a few things here. Your body naturally limits range of motion with symptoms when it degrades gradually in overall proper neuromuscular facilitation. Flexibility is actually a bad term to use too. Flexibility is uncontrolled range of motion, which is part of an injury happening. If your body can't control the movement, the joints are at risk. It's the law of reciprocal inhibition at play when you move with constantly. Without, if we couldn't move. Yep, that's true. I don't agree that flexibility is a bad term to use though, Terry. Flexibility and mobility, well, I'm going to go into what the difference between those are tomorrow. So tune in tomorrow if you want to learn about that. Only in the Garage is saying, hello, when I hurt my shoulder, I stumbled on your YouTube page and commented, and you replied that you're grateful, and that was January. Just been to the docs last week and confirmed you have a slap tear and frozen shoulder. I am really sorry to hear that. And unfortunately, when you have a slap tear and a frozen shoulder, those two things have to be treated differently. And sadly, the severity of the frozen shoulder is going to depend on what you can do for the slap tear, because unfortunately, when a frozen shoulder is bad enough, that is one of the very, very, very few injuries where sometimes the best thing for a frozen shoulder is to immobilize it and rest as much as possible, and don't push into anything that causes sharp pains. We've done some good podcast live stream episodes on frozen shoulder with Phil White, our resident physical therapist. I have trained people 3 times through frozen shoulder, 4 times now. So I've had a lot of experience with it and gotten people out of it. So you can get out of it. And but it depends on how severe it is. So if you can do movements from the earlier phases of a slap tear rehab protocol, then you absolutely should be doing that. But if it causes you pain, then that's a different beast of a thing. And if you want, when you've got conditions like that, you absolutely need some specialized programming and training. And so if you need that, go and head over to unitygym.com/slap tear, and you can check out all about how we deal with shoulder rehab and slap tears and stuff like that. And you're saying, do you have any insight into shoulder injections for frozen shoulder? It's not a steroid. Yeah, I do have insights into, I'm pretty sure it is a steroid that you're talking about. It's called I can never remember the name. It's a cortisol injection or a cortisone injection. I can never remember the name. I always mix it up. So I actually had that initially when I got my slap tear, and I wish I didn't. I really wish I didn't. I wish I knew what I know now, because I just went in there and I didn't get it explained to me properly. Because I was so goddamn desperate for a solution, and I didn't want to get surgery. And so what happens is, when you get those steroid injections, they give you an immediate increase in range of motion, an immediate reduction in inflammation, and an immediate increase in ability to be able to move. But it doesn't last. It's a short-term thing, 6 months maximum, and you cannot get more than 2 of those injections ever, because they actually do permanent damage to the tendons. And different doctors will say, some of them will say you can't have more than 1, some of them will say you can't have more than 2. The doctor that I had told me that generally speaking, he would never give more than 2. And he explained to me why, because like every time you get one of those steroid injections, they go into the tendons, they actually permanently weaken the tendons. And so what you do, so this is where they are useful. If you are in so much pain and you have such a small range of motion that when you you can't do your rehab properly, and your strategy is that you're going to get the steroid injection to reduce that pain, to increase your range of motion so that you can do your rehab properly with the goal that you're seriously going to strengthen that joint, then that can be a strategy that is something that I would go for if I went through that whole process again, and that's where I was. But if you can do the rehab and you can do the exercises without your symptoms getting worse, then I wouldn't get the steroid injection. That's my personal opinion. I'm not a medical professional, so take it with a grain of salt, but it comes from a lot of skin in the game, and it comes from having worked with exceptional physical therapists and sports doctors. So I hope that helps. KA is saying, a follow-up please. Sleeping is huge for recovery. Which routine works best for you? How many hours and what morning routine? And your personal choice of bed firmness and pillow height. Good questions and interesting questions. I haven't been asked that before. Sleeping is a massive part of results, and sleeping is such a big part of what I do that my wife absolutely hates me for it. She calls me a drill sergeant when it comes to bedtime because, so I've actually got a really good video on this, and I'll link it in the comments once the live stream has stopped. But if you go to my channel, and I'll go through this, but if you go to my channel and search for how to train your body to fall asleep early. I should change that title just to include sleep in the title because it's not a good title. Anyway, how to train your body to fall asleep early. So there's a good video there that explains in much better detail what I'm about to explain now. So the first thing that I think is, so if you don't know how important sleep is, it is vital for recovery. And recovery is how your body gets better at everything that you do in the gym. So if you didn't know this, when you do any kind of exercise, flexibility, cardio, strength training, hypertrophy training, whatever it is, you're creating a stimulus that then creates responses in the body so that the adaptation happens that gives you the result that you want. So stimulus, catalyst, adaptation. And the catalyst for the adaptation is recovery. So when you go to the gym and you do weight training, you don't get stronger while you're doing weight training. What you actually get weaker during the weight training session. So you create damage to the muscle fibers, you send signals through the nervous system, and there's all these hormonal responses that go on where the body releases all these hormones and goes, oh my God, we got to get stronger. But that adaptation, the increase in strength, the increase in muscle fiber thicknesses, all those adaptations occur during recovery. And the greatest part of adaptation occurs during sleep, during deep sleep. So deep sleep is what you want. And you actually go through sleep cycles. Sleep cycles last for 90 minutes. So every 90 minutes you have these sleep cycles and you have this ability to get into deep sleep. And so there's a couple of things here. One of the first things that's really important to capitalize on recovery is to have a sleep routine. You want to have a regular sleep routine so that your body gets into a rhythm that is similar to a circadian rhythm, which would mean that it is somewhat similar to when the sun goes down and when the sun rises. And so I think it's really, really important to have, rather than a wake-up time, like an alarm to wake up, an alarm to go to sleep. So I don't have an alarm because I don't need that anymore, but I have a time where I will look at the clock and go, oh, it's time to go to sleep. And for me, that's 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock is the time when it doesn't matter what I'm doing, it's time to turn everything off, it's time to dim the lights, it's time to start the evening routine, because I've got a 7-year-old child and a wife, so I can't just do things that I want to do myself. I have to coordinate my son, and I have to coordinate, what's going on with my wife. And get everything together. And so at 8 o'clock, everything's down so that we can hopefully be in bed and asleep by 9 o'clock. And if it is 9 o'clock and I'm not in bed with lights out, I start getting wigged out, which is why my wife calls me a drill sergeant. So that's that's the first step. And then for me, what that does is, that gives me 8 hours of time in bed asleep when you can, so that I can wake up at 5 o'clock and feel rested. And what we've learned recently about sleep is that, 8 hours is a rough time that most people need. Some people do better on less sleep and some people need more. But what we know now, what is more important is actually that you wake up naturally after one of your 90-minute sleep cycles. So if you had a perfect sleep cycles that went for 90 minutes, 7.5 hours is actually what you get, because 4 sleep cycles is 6 hours, so 5 sleep cycles is 7.5 hours. So if you actually wake up by an alarm in the middle of a sleep cycle, that's worse for you than if you woke up at the end of the sleep cycle before. So if you woke up at 6 hours after the end of 4 sleep cycles naturally, that you would feel more rested than if you woke up from an alarm at 6.5 hours or 6 hours 45 minutes halfway through your 5th sleep cycle. So what I do for myself is, when I go to bed at 8:30 or 9, I always wake up naturally. I have an alarm set for 5 a.m. because when I wake up, it's still dark, or it's coming into summer now. It will be light in another month or so, but during winter it's still dark. And I don't want to be waking up and checking the alarm, because I've been caught out many times where I'll check my phone and it's 3 a.m. and that's terrible, because then your brain starts ticking over and everything starts going. So I have an alarm that goes off just to let me know, okay, it's 5 a.m. and I'm always awake before my alarm. And it maybe once a month it will be my alarm that wakes me up, probably less than that. And then the other thing that's really important for me is caffeine. I've actually stopped drinking coffee. I experimented with coffee for the last 10 years. And what I got to towards the end of my coffee days, which was back in August, or no, when was it? It was June or July that I stopped drinking coffee, was that I was front loading my caffeine. So I was having 2 cups of coffee a day, and I was having both of them before 9 a.m. So that, and what I was also doing was I wasn't having coffee for the first 2 hours of waking up, because coffee affects your adenosine system, and your adenosine system isn't even awake for the first 90 minutes in the morning. So I learned that you get a better result with coffee and you avoid that lunchtime or afternoon crash if you don't have your first coffee until 90 minutes to 2 hours after you've woken up. So I was doing that. Then I was having a second coffee within about an hour or two of that. And so that way I was front loading all my caffeine, because caffeine has a half-life of 6 hours, which means that if you're having a coffee at like lunch or even 11 a.m., a late morning coffee, you've still got caffeine in your system when you're trying to get to sleep. So it's really, really bad cycle. And I was so I was having all my caffeine in the morning so that I would allow it to sort of come out of my body as well as I could by the time I was going to sleep. But it was still affecting my sleep negatively. And so I've been on this mission to improve my sleep hygiene for 10 years, because it's just such an important part of recovery. So now I don't have coffee at all. I only have black tea or herbal teas, and sometimes I'll have a decaf, because decaf still does have caffeine in it. But what I was finding with coffee was, the last time I drank a full strength coffee, I had had a couple of drinks the night before, not a lot. For me, if I ever do drink, I don't drink much at all these days, but I had like 2 or 3 drinks, and it was enough to make me just feel absolutely shit the next day. And I had a strong coffee. And what I noticed was, I still felt like shit, but I was also anxious from the strong coffee. And I was like, oh, fuck this. I'm not drinking coffee anymore. I'm just over it. So I don't drink coffee anymore, and my sleep is a lot better. And then as far as my bed goes, I don't know much about this. I've heard a lot of different opinions on it. What works best for me is that I use one of those foam mattresses. In Australia, we have this company called Koala, which is a more affordable foam mattress that you can get. Like, you can get these really expensive ones that are like $8,000 or something like that. But a Koala mattress in Australia for a king size, I think it's about $2,000 or something like that. And the queen size is, maybe $1,200 or something like that. And I love my Koala mattress. It's really nice. It's not memory foam, but on the ads, what they show is they put a glass of red wine on one side of the mattress, and somebody jumps on the other side of the mattress, and the red wine just sort of goes like this, and it doesn't tip. And that's one of the reasons we got it, because when we have a mattress with springs in it, I toss and turn a lot in my sleep, and my wife hates it. She reckons I wake her up all the time. So that's why we got that one, and it works really well. And then as far as a pillow goes, Again, if I wanted to spend the money on it, I would probably get one of those pillows that sort of cups your neck, because I try to sleep on my back for better quality sleep, but I just can't fall asleep, and I always end up defaulting to sleeping on my side. But I used to sleep on my stomach, and I had really bad back problems from that. And a chiropractor explained to me what's going on with that. And so I trained myself to sleep on my side. So now I sleep on my side. And I basically just use a pillow that's high enough so that my head sits in a neutral position. You know, if a pillow is too high, your head goes like that, and that's really uncomfortable. And if it's too low, your head goes like that. So I just have a pillow so that my head sits in a neutral position. So it's about that thick, and it's one of those foam pillows. And if you want to know more about everything that I do to get really, really good sleep and what I recommend for people, go and watch that video. You can search my channel for it. Okay, so Tomek is saying, hello, I have a stiff piriformis muscle in the hips. It's okay to train this almost every day. I have a problem with the stiff hip from this muscle and pain sometimes. I'm going to poke a hole in that comment, Tomek. I highly doubt that you know that you have a stiff piriformis muscle. We've made fun of this comment many, many times before, and I'm going to bring this up here. Phil, our resident physiotherapist, and I've got to search for the right thing here so that I can bring up the right images. So Phil, our resident physical therapist, always makes fun of these comments because the piriformis is only one muscle that makes up the glutes, that makes up the rotator cuff in the hip. So how would anybody really know that it's the piriformis that causes, that is tight and is the problem, is the restriction in their range of motion? For some reason, the piriformis seems to be this muscle that personal trainers and fitness professionals have latched onto and have mentioned all the time. And I remember it. I've been a personal trainer for 20 years now. And I remember in my early days, back in the early 2000s, everybody was talking about the piriformis, the tight piriformis, and how to release the piriformis. But if you look at it, the piriformis is just one of many muscles that are a part of the rotator cuff in the hip. And so it's not, I highly doubt that it's that you have a tight piriformis. It's that you have, tight external rotators of the hip. So can you stretch it every day? Yeah, you can. You can do anything every day, but you have to do a reduced intensity. So you have to do reduced load. So the more frequently that you do anything, the lower the load has to be, because your body has to have time to recover from it. And you wouldn't do it for every day forever. That would be considered a block of periodization. So for maybe one mesocycle, which in the UMS is 4 weeks. You might do 1 or 2 mesocycles of where you did, hip external rotation stretches for the glutes every day. You might do that for 1 or 2 mesocycles, and then you'd move to doing something different. You wouldn't just, that's what periodization is that I talked earlier in this live stream about. You don't just keep doing the same thing every day and expect the same results. And that goes for anything in training. Anything that you do for training, whatever it is that you do, when it's new to you, you will adapt to it. So you will achieve adaptation. Your body you'll get fitter, you'll get stronger, you'll get more flexible from doing this certain thing. But eventually those results will plateau. Guaranteed on everything that you cannot do the same thing forever and expect the same results. You will always plateau. And when most people who don't understand progressive overload and periodization, their response to that is just to try harder. And that just leads to frustration and often injuries. At that point, when you plateau, it is through progressive overload and periodization that you will achieve results. And they are complex concepts. There's a lot involved in program periodization. So don't any of you just do the same thing over and over and over again and expect a different result. Only in the garage is saying hydrodilation, I think it's called. Okay, sorry. I'm not sure what I was talking about before with hydrodilation. You're back to training now and it's getting better, but range of motion. And yeah, I did the exercise you had on your page and they helped. That's awesome. You need to use periodization though. Those exercises that I have on my page, they are ground zero for shoulder rehab. And if you imagine when you do shoulder rehab, you start down here and you want to be up here. And that first programming gets you to that step, and then you have to change your program to get to that step, and then you've got to change your program to get to that step. And it's this whole process of each mesocycle, each month, gradually increasing the difficulty, increasing the load on the muscles, increasing the range of motion so that you continue to make progress. So yeah, keep at it. Veronique is saying oxygen ozone injections are amazing and not steroid. Okay, cool. I've heard PRP injections are really good as well. I've heard that there's a lot of things that are really beneficial, and I'm careful that the stuff that I talk about with real passion and saying this will work are only things that I've had personal experience from, and that I've worked with really, really good physical therapists and doctors and sports doctors and specialists to be able to understand what my understanding is, to get the breakthrough in myself. And then I've then been able to replicate those results with my clients, either in person or around the world. So that I'm really careful to stay within my lane and only speak about things that I've got personal experience with, because I'm not a doctor and I'm not a medical professional. So when you guys come at me with stuff that I don't have personal experience, I can only kind of say, oh yeah, I've heard, or I think that it's good. And again, I might try PRP and try some of these things for some of my injuries, because I've got injuries in my knee that are kind of a niggling thing. Like I've got patellofemoral syndrome. I've had a meniscus tear, and I've been told by a sports doctor that PRP could help those things. Same with my lower back. I don't know exactly what you can do for spondylosis, for degenerative joint disorder, but I've a degenerative disc disorder. But I manage the pain. I don't have pain for day to day. So I don't know, maybe when I'm in my 50s or 60s, maybe things will change, and there'll be some new treatments that I haven't heard of yet. So yeah, maybe I will. What else have we got here? Only in the garage is saying, yeah, you have some view on steroid injection from what you've heard. Yeah, awesome. Well, look, I did it. I did a steroid injection on my first slap tear, because I had a slap tear in both shoulders. But I didn't do it on the second one, and my second one recovered better. The injury, the second slap tear that I had in this shoulder that I didn't get a steroid injection, is better now. Like I have absolutely nothing wrong with that shoulder now. This one, I can do everything that I want to do, but sometimes I will still get a little bit of discomfort, and I have to warm it up more. I have to sort of go back and do some of my scapular activation exercises and rotator cuff activation exercises before I do my workout, because it'll be just a little bit sore. So maybe that was because of the steroid injection, who knows? Singing Dancing Muscle Man is saying, you have one foot that has moderately excessive pronation and is almost completely flat. Do you have any suggestions on treating pronated flat feet? So I do, but I have to be careful, because I am not an expert on this. And I've got beautiful foot arches. Whenever I have seen a podiatrist once. I went to get ingrown toenails removed, and actually I've seen a podiatrist a couple of times, and I've got a chiropractor friend who does podiatry as well, and whenever they've looked at my feet, they always comment on how good they are, and they comment on how my heel and my Achilles and my calf are always in a really nice straight line, and I've got really nice high foot arches. And I put that down to, because they asked me how did I grow up? What did I do? And when I was a child, I grew up in the bush, and I ran around bare feet everywhere. And a lot of it was on grass and rocks and gravel and things like that. And so that's why podiatrists seem to think that my feet are so nice, and I have such high foot arches. And I wear barefoot shoes, so I wear these things called Feiyus. These are Kung Fu shoes, and I wear them until they almost fall off my feet. You can see they're halfway there, and they are virtually nothing on your foot. There's absolutely no support whatsoever in those, so it's like I'm just walking on a little thin layer of rubber. So I only wear runners when I go running. And I do wear runners when I go running because of the cushioning. Those things really aren't great for running. So what I would do, and I've learned a lot of these exercises, and I have done them in the past, they're just not a huge part of my training because it's not something that I need a lot of work on. But there's a lot of strength training exercises that you can do for your feet. So you can do, like if you just put your feet on the ground and you keep as much weight in your toes as you can handle to do this exercise, but you shift your weight as much as you need to your heels to be able to do it. Sorry, actually the opposite. So the more weight you have in your toes, the easier this would be. The more weight you have in your heels, the harder this would be. And you actually grab the ground with your toes and you try to pull yourself forward. And when you do it properly, like each time you do it, you can actually pull your body forward a very small amount. Like your feet can act like a hand, and they can grab onto the ground and pull your heel forward. And then you spread your toes out, and it's like you're trying to caterpillar your feet forward. I would be doing that daily to stimulate, the whole muscle system on the sole of the feet like that. And then what you can also do is you can do single foot balancing, where you balance on one foot but with your eyes closed. And when you balance with your eyes closed, because the vast majority of our balance comes from vision, comes from seeing the horizon. And so when you remove that, you rely only on your inner ear and on proprioception. And proprioception is this process that goes on in the nervous system where, like, if you're going to fall to this side, your nerves send a signal to the brain saying, we're falling this way, contract all the other muscles. And then the brain sends the signal back to contract all the muscles that stabilize you. And so when you remove, and of course all of this happens very, very quickly, but when you remove vision and you rely only on your inner ear and proprioception, man, your foot gets the most intense workout from that. And you'll find that it's in the early stages of that. Like when I was doing that, I tore the Liz Frank ligament in my foot 26 years ago now, and that was part of my rehab. And the first couple of times, the first several weeks or months that you're doing it, you can barely stand on one foot for more than like 5 or 10 seconds before you fall over. And you just try and do 60 seconds where you stand on one foot and you put your hands out. And if you have to touch your other foot to the ground, you do it, but you're working up to being able to do, 60 seconds without having to stop and touch the ground or anything like that. And then you can also do calf raises and tibialis anterior raises. They're really good for the foot and for the ankle. And KA is saying, I agree with you, piriformis gets a bad rap because of its involvement in sciatic nerve pathway, but it's one of many hip stabilizers. Yeah, it sure is. Thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. As you guys can see, I would have ended this live stream 40 minutes ago if none of you were commenting on here. And the more you comment, the more engagement we get. So if you guys enjoyed what I talked about with flexibility, go and grab the flexibility blueprint. Go to unitygym.com/flexibility. And if you've had the flexibility blueprint in the past, go and open it up again, because I just spent the whole weekend updating it with all this new information. And it is, I honestly believe, and I haven't yet seen a better guide out there to teach how to get flexible. I haven't seen it. We compiled so much information, and we spent a lot of time working together, my brother and I, to make it, really usable and really good information for you guys. So go and check it out. And if you haven't done so yet, hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you get notified when I go live. I'm going live every day these days at 5:30 a.m. in Australia, which is why you see me yawning and burping and all this stuff, because I've only just gotten out of bed at 5 a.m. I've gone to the toilet, made myself a cup of tea, come down, sat at my computer, turned it on, and the first words that I speak in a day are the words on this live stream. So you have to excuse me waking up whenever I'm doing these things. And so 5:30 a.m. in Australia, currently at daylight savings. That is 2:30 p.m. in Eastern time, I think. I've always got to check this, of course, because I don't live in America. But what time is it right now? It's 3:40 p.m. So yes, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time, 11:30 a.m. Los Angeles time, and 8:30 p.m. London time. And so for you guys, I go live from Sunday to Thursday, because of course we're in a time warp, and you guys, it's Sunday over there for you. It's Monday morning for me over here. Only in the garage is saying, I was trying to find some info about hydrodilation. By the looks of it, they inject in the capsule, it bursts to release the pressure. Does this sound like a steroid? That doesn't sound like a steroid to me, but man, I know nothing about that. I can't comment on that at all. I've never even heard of hydrodilation before. But look, I'll tell you this, my opinion on strength training for injury and for shoulder injury comes from working directly with some of the best sports physical therapists in Australia and some of the best in the world. These guys are physical therapists for the highest level, highest code of football in Australia for the football clubs. They don't work with general population. They work only with professional athletes. One of them has gone over to America to work with the NBA for a while. I don't know which team he works with. So these guys are like at the top of their field. And whenever I ask them about things like that, they always just kind of shrug their shoulders and went, yeah, you could get it if you need to. It might help a little bit. But the real magic comes from strength training and from retraining the muscle systems, because the truth is that when you have a traumatic shoulder injury, whatever happened to cause the injury, your body wasn't capable of handling. You weren't strong enough for it. Now, that could be very obvious if you took a hard hit on the field, or if you were just lifting way too much weight. You weren't strong enough for it. But whatever it was, you weren't strong enough for it. So you need to get stronger to be able to handle that. But what happens as a response to the injury, the body shuts down movement. The nervous system tightens up all these muscles. It creates inflammation. It restricts motion to prevent any further injury. And so what you experience from that is you have this injury, and then when your body cools down, like for me, when I did the slap tear, it was my first slap tear. I was like, oh, that's sore, but I finished my workout and I could still move my arm. I could still do my workout. 5 hours later that evening, I couldn't even move my arm past here without agonizing pain. Like to try to abduct, like to go from here to there, it was the sharpest shooting pain. And so your body just shuts down this movement. And then what happens is, every day that movement is shut down, your scapular stabilizers and rotator cuff start to lose their function. In the words of my physical therapist friend, he just said the stabilization systems of your shoulder basically forget how to do their job properly. And so then when you start trying to move again, when the inflammation's reduced and you can start to move your arm through a bit more of a range of motion, and you want to abduct your arm, or you want to flex your shoulder, or you want to externally rotate your shoulder in this abducted position, what happens is that the systems that are meant to hold the scapula in a certain place, that are meant to, create external rotation of the scapula and keep it depressed and all these things, they're not doing their job properly. And so while the good side is sitting here, the weak side is flailing out to the side. And your humerus is sitting in a position that it's not meant to, in the glenohumeral joint, and the rotator cuff, compounded with all this, the rotator cuff isn't holding the head of the humerus in position properly, and you start getting this joint glide and all these irregular movements. And so nerves start getting compressed that shouldn't be getting compressed, and you just feel this excruciating, agonizing pain, and you're just banging your head against the wall. And there is no injection that you can get that is going to fix that. Like, the injections may reduce inflammation. They may do what you've described there, where it creates more space in the joint. They may increase the strength of a tendon, but none of them are going to remind the shoulder stabilization system how to do their job properly. None of them are going to retrain the shoulder to do functional movement properly again. And that is absolutely critical to being able to get back to whatever it is that you want to do. And this is why, for general population people who don't give a shit about getting back to the sport that they want to be able to do, all they want to be able to do is put their shirt on without being in pain. Because when you've got a frozen shoulder or a slap tear, taking your shirt on and off is one of the most painful things that you'll ever go through. And for a lot of people, that's all they want. They just want to be able to put their shirts on and be able to reach, for the can of soup up here without being in pain. So an injection or surgery might be a viable option for those people, because they don't have to do any work for it. They can just pay a little bit of money, go and see a doctor or a surgeon, and get back to where they want to be. But I don't think anybody watching this live stream and anybody that's subscribed to this channel, it fits that category. I think that you guys are like me, and you really want to perform well at whatever your chosen sport is. And it could be yoga, it could be martial arts, it could be calisthenics, it could be weightlifting, it could be basketball, it could be rock climbing, whatever it is. You want to be able to continue to progress in your chosen field. And for those of you, it is vital that you work to regain that shoulder function. And that is a process. And if you want to learn that process, go and get the Slap Tear Rehab Blueprint. So you can go to unitygym.com/Slap Tear Blueprint. And of course, I'm talking about something that's different to what the topic of this stream was, but we just have so many of you guys that have slap tears out there and have shoulder injuries. And I'm starting to realize how much of an expert my brother and I are at dealing with these, because we've both had slap tears. We've both recovered from them without surgery. And we've now gone on to helping hundreds of people around the world have a life-changing result in a month, and go back to doing things that they couldn't even do before their slap tear. And these are people that worked with surgeons, with physical therapists, with physios, with doctors, couldn't get better at all. And the process that we use with them, that I'm talking about, this process of going up from one step to the next, to the next, to the next, it just works incredibly well. So if you want to learn more about it, go and get the Slap Tear Rehab Blueprint. Or if you just want to jump straight into working with me, go to unitygym.com/slap tear and you can join my online personal training. We've got a last couple of comments here. Yeah, 3:40 p.m. right now, so you're in Michigan. I remember you're over where my buddy Jack is. Over in Michigan. I'm sure you know Jack. I'm sure Michigan isn't that big, isn't it? Is it getting cold up there? It must be, right? You guys are going into winter. You guys are starting to get cold over in Michigan. Only in the Garage is saying, if I can relieve the frozen shoulder, might have more chance of slap fixing. Don't say if you can. Don't approach it with that mentality. You're going to relieve your frozen shoulder. Burn the boat. There is no other option. Like I saw surgeons and I saw doctors with my slap tears, and they have the worst outlook on it. They're like, oh, statistically you won't be able to go back to doing the things that you want to do, but if you get the surgery, you've got a 40% chance of this. And I just said, fuck that. There's no way I'm not bloody getting back to doing what I want to be able to do. Don't have no doubt in your mind that you're going to get back to doing what you want to be able to do, because whether you think you will be able to get back to your pre-injured state, or whether you think you won't be able to get to your pre-injured state, either way, you're right. So choose the right that you want to be. KA is saying, thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience with all of us. You're absolutely welcome. That's what I'm here to do. And I'm just grateful that I get people tuning into these live streams, that you guys are interested in what I've got to say. So tomorrow I'm going to go deeper into the flexibility blueprint. We're going to go into the second point, which is the difference between mobility and flexibility. That's an excellent description of injection surgical treatment versus progressive rehab training. Well said. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And that is absolutely what it's about. You don't want to be going for that stuff as your first point of call. So yeah, thanks for the kind comment. All right, team, I'm going to go up and see my family. My son and my wife are just starting to wake up now, so I'm going to go up and say good morning and get on with my day. I'll see you all tomorrow.